Well, the resume is going to get slightly boosted by a win over a 5-2 Georgia Tech team. That let's see, they get a loss against Louisville. They lost to Syracuse, yeah, by a field goal. That's right. And of course, started the season against Florida State. Haynes King at quarterback. And of course, Brent Key's done a nice job, especially it's always good to do a decent job after a horrible job by the previous coach. And that would be, of course, Jeff Collins. So what have you seen out of Georgia Tech?
Well, they take on the personality of their offensive line, of their head coach. He's a former offensive line coach, big guy, kind of cocky, little arrogant. And I mean that in a good way. His team plays like that. They think they're better than they are, which is a good thing. That's a compliment because they're not going to be afraid of Notre Dame. They weren't afraid of Florida State. If they had to play Georgia tomorrow, they're not going to be afraid of Georgia. It doesn't mean they're going to win, but they're going to play with confidence. And they're also what you'd expect from a former offensive lineman is they're very physical in the trenches. They're a tough team. They compete. They're good at running the ball. They're good at stopping the run. I mean, they're very much an old school team like that. And, the sign of a good football coach, in my opinion, Mark, is being able to show growth and development and say, hey, here's where we're not as good. Let's get better at it. You look at those numbers right there for Haynes King, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception. Do you remember how many interceptions Mark Haynes King threw last year?
I believe it was 16.
16. He's got, I think, 3 total turnovers this year in 7 games. And they've played a challenging schedule. They've played Florida State. They've played Syracuse. They've played Louisville. They've played Notre Dame. They've played Duke. They've played North Carolina. They don't have a bunch of games like Ohio State against a bunch of MAC teams and, some middle-of-the-road Big Ten teams. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. They've actually played, quality teams week after
week. They played Oregon, though. I don't think Oregon's on.
They played one good team. What happened in that game? What happened in that game? No, I'm just giving you a hard time on that one. But in all seriousness, they've played a quality schedule, right? He hasn't done this a bunch against FCS teams, Elon and Furman and teams like that. He's played good football. I mean, and the only reason they were even in the Louisville game is because he threw for over 300 yards and ran well in that game as well. So to watch the growth he's made from year 1 to year 2, that doesn't happen without hard work from Haynes King, but also without good coaching. You're also seeing Jamal Haynes start to really heat up. He was a 1,000-yard runner last year. Didn't start off well, Mark. I don't think he got to 100 yards in each of his first 5 games. I think he's over 300 the last 2 games. I think he's gone over 300 the last 2 games. And I'm sure you saw that walk-off 68-yard touchdown run he had against North Carolina this weekend, which was a heck of a play. But he's a very talented back. Their offensive line isn't super talented. There's no Joe Alt type guy on their line, but they're veteran. They're big. They're physical. They've allowed 1 sack this entire season. 1 sack. And if you watch them play, it's not a bunch of like Notre Dame where, Riley Leonard's only been sacked, I think 5 or 6 times, but it's because he's made a lot of guys miss of what should have been sacks. I mean, they do a great job of protecting him, and he's making good decisions. They've got talented receivers, and Eric Singleton and Malik Rutherford are good football players. So this is a quality football team. Their front 7 is not super dynamic on defense, but they're physical. They're smart. Tyler Santucci's a Mike Elko disciple, really quality young football coach. He was actually I think an analyst or GA at Notre Dame in 2017 under Mike Elko. Came with Mike Elko from Wake Forest to Notre Dame, then followed Mike Elko to Texas A&M, and then followed Mike Elko to Duke, and now he's now a defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech and has taken what a defense that was really bad last year and made them competitive. They're still not an elite defense by any stretch. They're not a great defense, but they're much more competitive. They've dropped their scoring average by about 8 points since last year. Their yards average has gone way down. Their yards allowed per play has gone way down. They're a lot more competitive football team, and it all centers around their ability to be very big and physical in the front 7, and they make life really hard on teams trying to run the football. I think North Carolina is the only team that's really had much success running the football on them this season so far.
And that guy, Omarion Hampton, is pretty good. The rock for them. So
it's pretty good.
That's understandable.
Yeah,
he is a good one. Do you like that? For all the conversations we've had, I don't know that we've really attacked this topic. Do you like the Notre Dame connection to the ACC and the mandated games based on that contract?
I'm fine with it. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense for them in basketball and other sports. And, I'm fine playing the ACC. The thing that you have to look at is why the ACC, and a big reason why is because Notre Dame has a desire to expand its brand into that part of the country. When you look at from Boston all the way down the East Coast into Georgia, that's an area where Notre Dame wants to expand its brand. And so now every year, Notre Dame is going into North Carolina. I think this is the first year in a while that Notre Dame doesn't play a road game in either Virginia or North Carolina. They, because I every year I see my family every year in the fall, because I'll fly to Virginia Beach or Norfolk, Virginia, and see my family, and then drive to the game either at Raleigh or Durham or Chapel Hill or Charlottesville or Blacksburg or wherever, and that's getting their foothold. Look at their roster. They're starting to add a lot more of those Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia kids to the roster, which is having a big impact. And, Bryce Young, the freshman from, obviously his dad was there, but they got him, and they got a teammate of his, Micah Gilbert from North Carolina, which is a big pickup. So Sam Pendleton, they're starting left guards from North Carolina. So they're starting to have more of that impact on, and that's what they wanted. Like we could talk about football reasons for the Big Ten and all those other type of things, but as you know, that's not how Notre Dame views it. It's not what league is best for us from a pure football standpoint, but it's what league is best for us to help us continue to build up our brand. That's going to help us in a lot of other ways beyond just making the most sense from a travel or a league standpoint. So I'm a big fan of it. I would make some tweaks I would have liked to have made some tweaks to it. I would like to have said, hey, we're going to have every year, we're going to play one of BC or Pitt every year, and maybe rotate a home and home with Pitt, then a home and home with BC, then a home. There'd be some games like that against some of your traditional rivals that I would have on there a little bit more frequently. You always have, or maybe you could say, we're always going to have a Northeastern game. So we're always going to play Pitt, BC, or Syracuse every year, and rotate it, that type of thing. I would maybe do some of those tweaks. But outside of that, I think it's been great. I mean, Notre Dame and Clemson have developed a nice little rivalry here, a respectful rivalry because of this. If it wasn't for this, the only time they would have played is 2018 in the playoff. But they had a great game in 2015. Then obviously Notre Dame beats them in an epic game in 2020. Clemson gets payback in the ACC title game. Notre Dame has the big win over 2020 in 2022. Clemson gets the rematch last year and gets payback last year. It's turned into a heck of a little rivalry that I appreciate and enjoy. And you get to see them play teams that I didn't grow up watching them play. And I kind of enjoyed it. I just would have liked to maybe tweaked it a little bit differently than the way they have. But overall, I think it's good for them. The thing that's hurt Notre Dame's schedule in recent years, Mark, is just USC being down. If USC was better and Stanford was what they were early in the decade, the schedule would look a lot different. And they've also caught some bad breaks where, we've talked about this before. In 2021, they kicked the season off at Florida State. Well, who knew that Florida State was going to be terrible that year? When it was first set up in 2013, you're like, boy, that 2021 schedule, well, that's going to be rough. But that's just kind of how it plays out a little bit.
Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football, talking Notre Dame. Of course, the Irish take on Georgia Tech. They're playing at the NFL Stadium, Mercedes-Benz, I believe is what they call that, 3:30 Eastern on ESPN. So Stanford's, of course, already on the schedule, of course. Then you got Cal and SMU. Are they being moved into that rotation? I assume that they will.
They haven't tweaked the schedule yet. I don't know what they're going to do. I would imagine that Notre Dame's going to wait until the ESPN makes their decision with the contract in a year. Are they going to keep the ACC contract or use that loophole to get out of it? And I don't think it really makes a lot of sense to tweak your schedule if you don't know if the league is going to survive beyond the next couple of years. But I would imagine they'll do some kind of tweaking to it. And I just don't know what that's going to look like. Because Stanford's off Notre Dame's schedule after this year. They have not re-signed their contract with Stanford. And I would imagine part of that is going to be the ACC. And somebody in our show today in the chat made a great point. Like the ideal, maybe it was on our message board, but the ideal situation for Notre Dame is to play Stanford in the ACC. And then you get them, every 4 or 5, in a decade, you get them 4 or 5, maybe 6 times, but you don't have to play them every single year like you have been. And it used to be beneficial for Notre Dame to do that. It's not anymore.